Everyone. My name is Aaron Baker. I'm the city staff representative on the Virgin Valley Historical Committee. Tonight we have a real treat in store for you. To those here in attendance and those watching from home, the Historical Committee would like to welcome you to the 7th in a series of Founders Forums. Dorothy Frehner Thurston is our guest this evening. Geraldine Zarate is the moderator for this evening's forum. Geraldine Zarate will introduce Dorothy Frehner Thurston. I have the great pleasure of introducing Geraldine Zarate, our moderator. Geraldine is a Mesquite native. Her roots run very deep here in the communities. I'm sure a lot of you are aware. Her great experience and friendships are a great asset to the committee. We are grateful to her for her moderating this evening's Founders Forum.
Welcome. In 1994, Mesquite was getting ready to celebrate its 100th birthday. And the wisdom of whoever decided to assist Dorothy Frehner in her research, Dorothy Frehner Thurston in her research for the history of Mesquite, gave her a grant, and she was able to produce the book, A River and a Road. As a former librarian, I can tell you that for a long time I'd had a lot of difficulty finding a definitive and concise history of the valley. When anyone, newcomers or interested people, would come in, I had really no reference, no good reference to give them. I was so thrilled at that time to have this book produced. That winter, my mother and I were invited to fly on the city airplane. The city actually had an airplane in those days, to Provo, to look at the research that Dorothy had done on the book, and to visit with Dorothy, and we were accompanied by others. But we had such a good time that day, and I was so pleased. I could see that this book was going to be a real asset to the collection, local history collection. It was a lot of research. Dorothy had file cabinets full of pioneer journals, photographs, things that I had never seen before. And from this, she produced this book. Dorothy is here with us tonight, and I'm really pleased to be able to have her here and to share her memories and her knowledge of the history of Mesquite. Dorothy, first let's start out with you telling us about who were your parents.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that, but first of all I've got to tell a little bit more about that trip to Provo. They were frightened. They were frightened to be in the air in that little airplane. And they had a pilot who was very wise. He didn't say a word, but he'd get really high, and then all of a sudden he would say, "Uh-oh." That's all he'd say.
And we had earphones. We could hear all of this. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. So they were happy to be on the ground. And I did want to say thank you for coming. I don't understand why anyone would be here tonight when the Iowa caucuses are taking place. And I was hoping you'd all stay home. But anyway, we're glad you're here, and I appreciate it. And you make me feel very special for being here. The question you asked about my parents, Fenton and Mary Frehner, and we lived on a little ranch up above, or below Lynch Hill, where the high school is located now, and we were way out of town. Actually, the only house up there, the only lights there at night. And I had 7 miserable brothers. 3 of them are here tonight. No, I love
not the miserable ones.
Pearl especially, when we had 2 ways to go home. One was up the lane with the big brush and everything. The other was up the highway at night when we walked by the cemetery. Now that's quite a dilemma for anyone that was a little afraid. So Burrell would protect me until we got to the cemetery, and then he'd take off running like crazy and leave me alone. So he was such a good, devoted brother. And pay honor to him tonight.
What did your father do for livelihood?
Well, he was a farmer, and he and Mother lived up on the ranch in a tent for a while, and they loved it. Mother said later in her life, she said that was the most comfortable home, and she had a little stove and a little table, and it was like playing house for the first time. And Dad fixed they had a big cottonwood tree out there, and Dad put up a pulley on the tree So Mother would do her washing outside and pin it to the pulley, and it'd go up the tree, up way high in the sky, and dry in a few minutes, and then pull it back down. And very ingenious as far as making things happen, and they loved that little home. And then later they built a little 2-room home from some brick.
And that house is no longer there, is it?
No, that's not there anymore.
Now, your mother was a local girl, wasn't she?
She was raised in Bunkerville.
Wow.
Henry Levitt and Mary H. Levitt's youngest daughter.
And her sister, one of her sisters, is Juanita Brooks, right?
Yeah, Juanita's the oldest, the mother's the youngest.
And did they meet here in the valley? Did they go to school here together?
Right, Mother and Dad, they went to school and fell in love and lived happily ever after, except for a few days. You know how it is.
What did all your brothers and sisters do up on the ranch up there for fun? What was their?
You know, Dad was, he built a place that was really designed for young people and children. The school got rid of their big double hump slide because it was too dangerous, and so guess who got that? My dad got it for us, and then he made swings and out of I wish I could describe it better, out of a tire pulley that you went around and round and round and had to beg if you ever wanted to get off if somebody was pushing you. And teeter-totters, and he put together a basketball court, and up on the ditch bank he had sort of a mini track with a high jump and things for the boys to do.
And then wasn't there a swimming place close by?
Oh yes, there's a big dugout, and that was so fun to swim in. And of course there was always a rope, and you'd go across the ditch and back. And
It
I
was
hate
on
to be
the
telling
big
stories
town.
on the road tonight, but
Well, he's here, so
yeah, he's here, so I could. There was one night he decided he was going to get Graham, so he took his little pocket knife and he cut the rope a little bit, and then Graham came and swung across, and he didn't fall in, so he cut a little more and called Graham back over, and he swung across, he didn't fall in. And then finally Brett thought, well, I better test this, and guess who fell in? It served him right. It served him right. We had a lot of fun with it.
So as you were growing up, you didn't have television?
No television, radio after the power came in 1939. Had a little radio, and we'd sit around it and listen to the Lone Ranger and all of those things that you.
Where'd you go to school?
Went to Virgin Valley Elementary School.
Did you walk?
Most of the time, not always. Dad drove the bus for a while, so for a while. Sometimes, most of the time, we'd walk home. But we tried to.
How about high school?
Over at Bunkerville.
And was there a bus then?
Yes. Yeah, it was the best of times. It really was, growing up here in the valley. We were somewhat isolated, I guess, compared to today, because if you think about it, the exposure to the world came in many different ways. For instance, the mail, and maybe some of you old-timers can remember this, but the mail was really our connection. If they wanted to make ice cream, they'd order ice from St. George through the mail. If Dad wanted to get 500 chickens, he'd order the biddies, and they would come through the mail in big little boxes like this, and they'd come chirping. And if we wanted penny candy from the store, we'd ask the mailman to bring us back a nickel's worth. And you could also jump on the mail and ride, and I don't remember how much. It seemed like it was 10 cents to ride to St. George. That was a lot of money then. So the mail was important in exposing us to the outer world, but then we had other things and other people that really made a difference. I remember Mr. Mitchell, he was our 5th grade teacher, and he took a little survey one day and found out that we had not been to Hoover Dam, none of us in the 5th grade, so he prepared a little field trip, and we had this field trip to Hoover Dam and spent the entire day there. And what an experience for a child to get that far away from Virgin Valley. Going to St. George was a treat once in a while, but to Hoover Dam, that was something else. Then we had teachers and friends and people that exposed us to music. Mr. Rowley, our 6th grade teacher, exposed us to some classical music, and he'd have us put our head down and think about all of the wonderful things that were going on. The one I remember especially was the Grand Canyon Suite. And you could almost hear the donkeys going down the trail and the beauty of the earth and all of those things that were so wonderful. And then he'd take us in the auditorium and he'd tell us, now, you express yourself through music and you are to do anything you feel like doing. And I can see the 5th and 6th grade teachers sitting over in the corner. They must have been having a heyday, because all of us were just going through it with all of our, expression. And so he taught us to express yourself. He and Roberta Bowler was good at doing that with us too, and being a free agent. Then, am I talking too much?
No.
Okay. Then my father, of course, he had a canny way of bringing the world to us. He'd go to California to take hogs to the market, and he came home one time with a big flatbed truck with a big old bunch of bananas. There must have been 100, 200 bananas on that front bunch. It was the hugest thing I've ever seen. And there we learned about how bananas grew and how sickening they could be after you've eaten 100. We learned so much, and he'd come home sometimes from the stock market. He'd make sure that he would take maybe 300 or 400 pennies, and he'd toss them up in the air, and that was our treat. And boy, some of them were really fast at gathering those up, especially Graham. He had honey on his hands. You could just gather those up so fast. So, they did try to make things exciting and good for us. And when my dad loved technology, and I remember the night that the power came on, we came down into town, and there was the lights on at the Elwood Theater, and he goes home and it's still dark up there, but he had a radio ready to go, and he went out to the fuse box and played around with it and got that radio, and he was just so fascinated by the fact that sound could travel that far. And of course in the summer here too, we would sleep outside because we had no air conditioning, and that's where we were exposed to the creations and the heavens and the stars. We could see forever, it seemed like, and you'd look at one little spot and you knew that there was something, a power greater than anything we ever knew. And so we had developed a great love, if you would, for the Creator and the earth and the special things that are on the earth. My parents seemed to always love nature, and they passed that on to us, and I'm so grateful. A few years ago, I was reading a book called, I think it's The Greatest Salesman, and I read a little part, and I thought, oh, that's my parents. They could have written this, so I brought one paragraph, if you'll let me do this. Agbandino said, I will greet this day with love in my heart. And how will I do this? Henceforth will I look on all things with love, and I will be born again. I will love the sun, for it warms my bones. Yet I will love the rain, for it cleanses my spirit. I will love the light, for it shows me the way. Yet I will love the darkness, for it shows me the stars. I will welcome happiness, for it enlarges my heart. Yet I will endure sadness, for it opens my soul. I will acknowledge rewards, for they are my due, yet I will welcome obstacles, for they are my challenge. And I thought that described my parents really, really well. As far as exposure to the other things, we always had teachers that had us memorize things. Boo Ben Adam, may your tribe increase. I don't know, maybe you remember that. If you think you're beaten, you are. Oh, God, forgive me when I whine. I have 2 feet. The world is mine. And of course, everyone has to memorize the Gettysburg Address fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent. And so on and so forth, and so, and all the states and capitals, and I know the young people do that today, but that was bringing exposure to us.
Yeah, Mesquite was still a provincial little town. I mean, it still, wasn't touched by the outside. But when we did have teachers and people who did come in, families that had traveled and things like that, that's one thing about Mesquite, because maybe it's isolation. Everybody had to really rely on each other, and there may have been some differences, fights over water, who got water turns. But when the chips were down and things happened, those families would be the first to support you and help things that needed to be done. Who were some of the adults that you remember?
Well, I wrote down a few today, but you can't even start to do that, because every person in this valley, we knew everyone, and every person in this valley made a difference in forming our personalities and our whatever. I mean, how can you live in a valley and know Aunt Babe Pulsifer, who was so generous that she'd give you the shirt off her back, and I remember that. And the Woods family, you go through the door and they would hug and kiss you, and all of them would hug and kiss you, and they had all these good-looking boys, and that was fun. And, Deloy and Selma Abbott, J.L. Bullard were so accommodating, and Leonard and Daisy Rever, they had a home full of music and laughter, and Albie Colton, we had to walk by Albie Colton's station to get home. And I don't know whether my siblings remember, but there were times when it was hot and we were on the other side of the street, and they would motion us over and give us a treat. And I keep thinking, a child will never forget moments like that. And so I love Albie and Rod and his family for being so kind to us. Wes and Bert Hughes, of course, I said it, their feet and on, she's my mentor for sure. And Bert Buller, who was a free thinker, and she taught us much about enjoying life along the way. And your grandparents loved to travel and were meticulous, and every time the bus would go around the corner down there, and we'd go past your grandparents' home, and that meticulous looking lawn and the beautiful surroundings, and I used to think how inviting that looked. And Marion and Jean Hughes, who were meek and good, and Pat and Maureen, who made Christmas come alive, and Stell Hafen, who had a rose garden like no other. She will never know what those beautiful roses did for the rest of us in this valley. We tried with roses, it just didn't work. But she made it happen. And Max Hafen. We lived close to him for a while. He whistled every minute that he worked. It was the most beautiful whistle. And I miss that sometimes, and I wish I could whistle like Max. Can you do that, Gary? Just about, not quite.
I'd be able to drive a tractor and do it too, above the noise of the tractor,
Yeah, the Hardys and the Frehners and the Jensens, Burnhams and Toblers and McKnights and Pulsfers, Thurstons and Revers and Hugheses and Knights and Walkers and Pollocks and Levitts and Petersons and Harpers and Coltons and Bullers and Horts and Abbotts and so many more that I probably Huffmans and the Lynches and the Wardens. So yes, we did. Of course, my own parents had the biggest effect on who we are. I've had a saying that my children and grandchildren get tired of, but I've had it on my wall all of my life, and it is, happiness is a choice. And I think that's true. Happiness is a choice, but that came from my parents. Do you know any mother who had 11 children who would wake up singing in the morning? Well, she would. She would sing. And Dad would tell stories, and they were happy. And they loved the morning, and they loved the sunsets, and they loved the mountains, and the snow, and the rain. And,
all of these people in town, and some of my memories too, were the celebrations that we'd have over holidays. And what are some of your memories of some of the holiday celebrations?
Oh, we had, it's a sense of community all the way. If there was a junior prom, it wasn't for juniors, it was for the parents and for everyone in town. And you'd go, and some of those old-timers, boy, could they dance, and you could just sit there and be entertained all night. The Adams in Bunkerville, what's her name? Oh, well, anyway, the Adams were really great dancers, and I thought I could remember. But anyway, the Mitchells and others. And
Reed and Durrell?
yes, Reed and
They were
Durrell.
dancers.
Thank you. Couldn't they dance?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? How fun that
And do you
was?
remember the kids, the teenagers were not embarrassed in it, you know, I mean,
Oh, no.
yeah, because it was just, yeah.
No, it was wonderful. So,
Do you remember Halloween celebrations we used to have here?
yes, I do remember Halloween celebrations and the Christmas program. Every Christmas Eve, it was a community thing, and every May Day they had the little program. And can I tell another one on Burl? Anyway, they couldn't find him. It was time to start, and he was not there. He was up in a tree, but it's because they'd assigned him to dance with the boy, and he wasn't going to do it. So. But anyway, Halloween's always fun. You could wear masks in those days, and everybody came. And Mother made us all costumes one year, and we just were so happy to go. And Dad came home from work. He was tired and ornery, and Mother said, well, get ready and let's go. And he said, no, I'm not going. And she just begged him to go, and he wouldn't do it. And so she was irritated. And she could get irritated, you know. And she bundled us all up and took us to the dance. And during the course of the night, you could identify everyone, you know, this one and this one and this. You could tell by their walk and by their movement. And there was one crazy guy there. He had toilet paper hanging out, and you know, from everywhere, and was dancing with all the women, and nobody knew who he was. And then they gave the prizes away, and he won first prize, and yeah, it was my dad. So, you know, we had fun times. We had fun times there.
Do you remember some unhappy, sad times in your childhood?
You know, I really do. If I can talk about them, I wrote down a couple today because, and then I'll tell you a story of the real change in my life. You know, everything was perfect and ideal, and we were protected in the early years. But as we grew older, we began to witness the unfairness of life. The sadness I felt when the town drank, when I would see him, it was such a waste of humanity. And I recall the desire I had in my young heart to fix things. I wanted to fix it for him. I wanted his family and his children to have the quality of life that my family had. So that was one of the things that that made me sad. I also had pain for two dear friends who often went to their empty house at night because their mother was in an institution for the mentally ill. And I admired those two young ladies and respected their resilience and their ability to nurture each other and become models of good and admirable citizens. And I think you know both of them, but they're wonderful women. And I do remember a time during the war when I witnessed from afar. We lived at the ranch, but the cemetery was out that direction also. And I remember standing afar and watching this young soldier being buried. And I remember how, for the first time in my life, I thought, what is war? Why would people want to kill each other? It was so foreign to me. And I remember the 21 gun salute, and I remember sort of shuddering as they did that. And I thought about it a lot and about war. And I remember when World War II was over, what a day that was. Do any of you remember that? I sure did. I I remember during the war first, the long convoys of army trucks up and down this road. The two bridges here were the only two that connected California with Utah. So they had to be protected because if they bombed those bridges, it would cause all transportation between Salt Lake and California to be closed. And so there's long convoys going up and down this road all the time, and you could not pass. So if you were headed somewhere and there was a convoy, you were in trouble. You just stayed behind. I remember being huddled in a darkened room when we had blackouts, and one time we even heard the drone of an airplane, and of course the heartbeat was, you know, fast and furious. We'd turn out everything and sit, and my folks would have us sing or do something like that. And I remember collecting foil from gum wrappers to help the cause, and I remember Dad and my brother Dale guarding the Riverside Bridge. They'd go there at night with their guns and make a fire, and then if somebody would come up on the bluff there and flash their lights, that meant they were to stop all the cars, turn off their lights, put out the fire, and whatnot. So these two bridges were very, very important during the war. And then I remember the day the war ended. I was 7 years old, nearly 8, and this radio, we'd heard the previous Monday that the bomb had been dropped on Hiroshima, and another bomb was dropped on Nagasaki on Thursday, and it was Tuesday the 14th of August when President Harry Truman announced that the Japanese had surrendered, and we were jubilant. We gathered near our radios, and you could hear the details and the thousands of people screaming in the streets of America. And we heard the broadcast from New York's Times Square, and we could hear the comments and the shouting, the celebrating and the laughing and the crying. And Mesquite had its own celebration. Every available car buzzed up and down the main drag with the occupants honking their horns and screaming from open windows, "The war is over. The war is over." And pandemonium reigned. Every American citizen was affected in one way or another. War is ugly, and we don't like it, but sometimes we have to have it.
Did you know from Mesquite who was in the military?
There's quite a list that were in the military in World War I and World War II, in the Korean War, and I think I don't have.
Do you remember rationing? Was food rationing?
Yes, let's see. Was it sugar? Someone help me. I think sugar.
Gasoline, tires, shoes, a lot of things.
Rubber, it seemed like the tires and things like that. Yeah.
And back to this, I believe you had, the sad things that happened to you. I believe you had a cousin, did you?
I did, and that's probably my first wake-up call in life, because life has always been so wonderful and beautiful and fun. And this little cousin of mine, Leola, was a little younger than I was, but she was charming, and we were inseparable. And we just did not want to be apart for any reason, any time. And we would giggle and laugh, and our parents got so disgusted with us because girls tend to do that, little girls. And I remember being at the ranch, and we were giggling one night, and the boys were saying, "Oh, get them out of here." And finally Dad said, "You can't stop giggling, you're outside." Well, outside was frightening. There's no lights, and we had hobos, a lot of hobos in the area. And so we went outside, and we sobered up and decided we'd come back in and ask to be seated again. So we came back in, and we were sober for a few minutes, and we decided the only way we could make it through was not to look at each other. And so we sat down and started to eat, and all of a sudden our eyes met, and we just spurted food all over the table. And so we were outside again. We loved life. I mean, we'd go up on that Lynch Hill. We had a little perch up there. We'd go up, and we'd watch those cars come down that hill, and some of them were going 30 miles an hour. I'm telling you, it was fast. It was exciting, and we'd wonder where they were going. People that had these cars that could go far places, and it was exciting to talk about it. And we talked about a lot of things, and little girls talk about, and decided we wanted to write a poem, so we went to our dads and said we need to write a poem for the children's friend, and so we both sent in a little poem to the children's friend. I mean, they were top-notch literary stuff, I'm telling you. It was something else, and then we waited for them to come, and I think mine came first, and I was so disappointed because hers wasn't there, and I couldn't celebrate till hers came. But anyway, let me get back to the story here. We did all kinds of fun things, and our dads called us Sass and Dub, and then one day, well, we all wore little dresses to school. You didn't wear pants in those days, and under the dresses you wore the full little skirts, you know, and the long brown legging stockings, and one day Leola came home from school, and she was, her mother was across the street at the Revers, and Leola was reading a book, and she backed up to the fire to get her legs warm, and her little skirts caught on fire, and she ran out the door screaming, and she was ablaze, and rolled over on the hard ground a few times, and her mother heard the screams and came running, and by then she was burned really badly, but her mother and dad wrapped her in wet sheets and took her to Las Vegas, which was quite a distance because there was no doctors anywhere, and she kept telling them, "Don't worry, I'm okay." And my mom came home and told me about it, and I knew that she'd be okay. I knew the next morning she'd come in and we'd be giggling again and bouncing, and so I went to school, and I was sitting there in the room, and I looked out the window, and I see my mom coming up the sidewalk, and she comes up and she says, "Dorothy, we need to go to Las Vegas. Leola's not expected to live, and she wants to see you." And I got in the car and we went down to my grandmother's home, Grandma Dorothy Frehner, and when we get there, the telephone rings, and the announcement came that she had passed on, and so my grandmother just, sank to the floor and in a faint, and it was quite an ordeal, and I kept thinking, this is not real. I'm going to wake up in the morning, and this really is not happening. Little girls do not die, and my friend does not die. But I remember the funeral, and all of the little girls packed flowers, and they sang a little song. My favorite song was "Asleep, Asleep, Away in a Manger." So they wrote little words for it. "We love you, Leola, we miss you, we stand here in sorrow that you have to go. Again we shall see you, of this we are sure, we'll be there together, to part nevermore," and then asleep, 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 asleep. And so it was a wake-up call that not everything in life is fair.
Was there a concern about lack of medical help here locally because of the situation like that?
There'd been a lack for 100 years. We just didn't have the medical help.
Yes, you have to go so
far.
far.
Now to have doctors and things. Yeah, if something happened, either St. George or Las Vegas. But
yeah. What now? I have a note here that your son-in-law gives you umbrellas. Why does your son-in-law give you umbrellas?
Well, that story is stems from probably 15 or 20 years ago when it was Christmas time, and they were asking me to tell stories about our early Christmases. And Christmas in the valley was fun. My parents always went out to Holly Hill and get holly, and out to get mistletoe off the whatever kind of trees are out there. And we just had so much fun. But one year in my small mind, I came up with the idea that I wanted an umbrella in the worst way, but I did not dare ask my parents for something so elaborate and expensive. But I knew if I wished hard enough, that would come true. And so I went to bed, and I never was disappointed on Christmas, but I knew that that umbrella would be there the next morning, and I woke up and it wasn't there. And I don't know why, I mean, it was probably a little I was wondering a little bit why that wish did not come true, but the other came up later that day and that week, and my dad took some garbage to the dump, and you know what happened? We get to the dump. You know what we found? We found the skeleton of an umbrella. I didn't have anything on it, but talk about fun. We brought that thing home, and Leola and I, we put paper on it, and found out that didn't work when you put it down and up, and then we got material and tried that. I wouldn't have traded the creative things for anything. So when I told my son-in-law this, Christmas morning that year, probably 16, 17 years ago, opened it up, and there was my umbrella. And of course, I had to shed a tear. And every year since, I have an umbrella, so if anyone is in need of one, I can just help you out.
Not that we need umbrellas much here.
But I guess I feel a little guilty, because here is a young girl that's only had one wish in her life, and it's been multiplied 15 times. And I think of the children that don't have that opportunity, and of course it makes me a little sad each Christmas. I hope that children all over the world are getting their umbrellas.
Dorothy, when you were doing research for River and Road, did you find some surprising things? Did you find things that you didn't know about? Did it give you a perspective on the history of Mesquite that you kind of hadn't thought about or realized? Because your research has been very extensive at that time.
It really did. When I first started, I found that there was absolutely nothing. I kept saying, how can I do a project on Mesquite? There's nothing written, nobody kept journals. And then as you start to piece things together, and you find a little bit here, and you find a picture or two here, and you go talk with somebody else, and you go to the Howard Pulse first, and they tell you stories, and spent 7 years collecting. And I almost got to the point I didn't want to stop collecting. I didn't want to start writing. I just wanted to keep collecting. But I found the people here to be sturdy and stalwart. And I think probably 90% of the people here were very poor, including us. We didn't know it. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, sometimes we get too many things, don't we? And it seems like things are supposed to make us happy, but we lived in a community where we just enjoyed each other. We had fun at the dances, we had fun at the basketball games. We hated Moapa Valley, and then I found out they have wonderful people down there.
I think that was a really unifying factor in the early settlement, was that everyone was pretty much the same economically, that no one had any, and willing to share what they had.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly.
Now, how did you start with your research? How did you become the person that it seemed like people went to find? And I know, Verd Hughes, who, here at Louise,
she's marvelous.
Yeah, she's really missed. I always think of wanting to call her up and ask her to solve this question I have, but she was a great help. How did you get started on it? I mean...
Oh, I was doing my master's thesis, and I was doing it on downwinders because of the effect of this valley and the downwinders, and so basically I'd done 8 or 9 months worth of research, and I contacted every family in this valley to find out what types of leukemia and thyroid disease and cancer and you name it, and it got to be that it was sort of a down. After I'd visit with people and I'd find out all the things that were going on, I'd get off the phone or I'd go home and I'd worry about the effects for future generations and whatnot with this thing happening in our backyard. And then one of the professors there, he said, you know, why don't you do a history of mesquite? And that's really where I got started, and I switched over and started to do it. And so if I had an assignment, I'd take one little segment and write a paper and turn it in, and so I eventually had this little paper and this little paper, and you know, I did my thesis that way.
So on your research on the downwinders, what did you find? What are the conclusions you came to?
Devastating, absolutely devastating. And they would say,
do you remember the testing? Do you remember sitting out and watching?
We'd go outside at school. They'd let school out in the morning. We'd go out and we'd count down 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and then the mushroom would come up. And we'd all cheer and burn, you know, look at us. And even in the elementary school, they used to put badges on the kids, and they'd change colors. And oh, we're so fortunate to be here in this wonderful place. And then they started telling us, oh, keep your kids inside. That's a few years later. And wash your cars down and all that white stuff. You know, rinse off the lawn before you let them play. And then you start to worry. And I guess I was, it's 1955, I was the student body president here, and we invited two of the Atomic Energy Commission officials to come and talk to us. And the first one got up and he said, you have the highest fallout in the nation, but you have nothing to worry about. You have nothing to worry about. I'm telling you, you have nothing to worry about. And I'm thinking, okay, you said that 3 or 4 times. And then the next one got up and he said essentially the same thing. And for the first time in my life, I started to worry. And so, you know, you don't want to get me started on this one. You might be here all night, but anyway.
But you have been asked, haven't you? You have spoken out on this.
Yes,
even up to the last threatened test, though it were below ground, the striker test, I believe it was called. And you were asked to speak in Las Vegas, was it?
No, it was in
St. George.
And no, it's a concern, but you know, what can you do? You can't be bitter. We're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and these things happen, and it has had a devastating effect on families, but you can't be bitter. I love this country, and I love this nation. They should have been more forthright and honest with us. And I think they're admitting that there's a lot of other things besides just the cancers, you know, the brain tumors and all of those things that take place, liver.
So from this research then, this is kind of what started it going then, and this is when you begin to accumulate journals, some of the pioneer journals, and you have them, and you reference them in your research for River and Road. And a story that's always fascinated me, I can remember in 4th grade hearing the story and being amazed and impressed. And Vita Cox was our teacher, and I remember writing it on the story of the 3 strangers. Because as we look at the history of mesquite and the failure after failure, and finally those young men that came over from Bunkerville and were determined to make the dam stick, to make, you know, tame the river, but it's just they sort of lacked just a little more money, a little more expertise, a little more organization, a little more drive, and here came these 3 strangers. Now, you've researched somewhat, but yeah, we've just not found much out about them, have we? Tell us a story about these 3 strangers.
I tried. Well, they actually were supposed to have been prospectors coming through, but they were so poverty-stricken here with those little men out there digging the ditch 7 miles, and to have strangers who were coming through on a wagon and offered to take them up and buy fencing and help them with their project and give them money and give them food, and they stayed around for a while, and then eventually left with giving someone their land for a trip to Moab for the train, so.
And they just disappeared.
And I tried
far as we
to find them. I've gone to, and I think you did too, didn't you?
Yeah, and one of them being called Captain, I remember thinking, I wonder if he was even a military man, for him to have had the well, charisma maybe to get the young men to, you know, take a group up to the mountains to get fence posts and give them money and send them up to Milford to get the wire, and they just had such organizational skills, and for these young men to follow them. And I mean, this is what kept finally the permanent settlement of Mesquite, this 1894, if that was it. Well, Dorothy, what do you think about Mesquite? Obviously you love Mesquite, but you haven't lived here in a long time. You grew up here, but you married and moved away. You married a local boy though.
I did.
But you both chose to
The most
move
handsome
away.
kid in town.
And his family was Thurston's,
Right.
and so
Yeah,
he
he
was
passed
coming
away. He passed away in 1980, and I have to tell you that I probably wouldn't have got through that if I hadn't thought of the Leora Revers and Angie Barnums and the women in this Mesquite and Bunkerville who were widows, and they raised big families. And I would work at the cafes a short period of time, then I would go back to school thinking, I can't put another day in. And I remember Leora, I'd come back the next year and there she'd be cooking at that hot place and sweat running down her face, and you just have to know that those two women, and Angie the same way, Angie would be at the school, and Margaret Hardy, and just so many of them, but they gave me courage. There were nights that I would think of each one of them, including my own grandmother, who was a widow for 50 years,
So what did you do? What did you lost your husband and you still had children?
had children.
Needed help?
Yeah, and decided to move and go to Provo and go to school, and you know, here I was, a grandmother, and trying to go up to school with all those young, bright students at BYU, and I thought, how am I going to get through this? So I decided to outsmart them, and I got me a briefcase and walked around campus, and they thought I was a professor or something. You do what you have to do. You do what you have to do.
Well, I think that education really helped because the research and the organization that you used in preparing this book, that I still think is the most definitive and concise history of the Valley, was just wonderful. I know at the time when we were anxiously waiting for its publication and wanting to use it, and it's been that way. We use it a lot. I mean, it's used a lot at the museum, and
it wasn't even nearly completed, and I guess history's never finished.
That's true.
I just felt like it wasn't even partially finished, but you know what? It's the best we could do at the time.
Yeah, well, it's great.
You've been very gracious about it and helpful. And
Well, the city, I was grateful that the city recognized the need for that also. That 100-year birthday was just really important, and the book helped us understand. And a lot of the people that move to Mesquite and don't understand, or don't, you know, who are curious about why would people come to this, you know, especially when they come here. I met someone the other day who had bought a home here and tried to live through July and August and couldn't do it, so they bought a second home in Montana. But our great-grandmothers still cooked over fires and wore heavy clothing, and so I try not to complain too much during July and August in my air-conditioned home, but I'm amazed. What kind of spirit do you think it took for those people to stay?
I can't imagine, especially, well, this is a little gross, but I can't imagine not having a shower every day. Of course, you have the big ditch, and I think most everyone got in the ditch one part of the day to cool down a little bit, so, yeah.
But they stayed because they loved it and they had family here, and
Yeah.
they were kind of sent, and they knew that they had a mission.
Exactly.
And that
they've made it certainly better for us, and we just need to pay tribute and honor. And of course, like you mentioned, they had their differences, they had their water fights, they had their spats with neighbors, but boy, when it was time for help, everybody stopped what they were doing and helped their neighbor.
Well,
I think it's fascinating that, for instance, if someone died, nowadays, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and if someone died early on, the women would make paper flowers if it was winter time and there were no flowers, and the men would build a casket, and some of the women would line it, and some would clean the home, and the others would watch over the body, and the expense was zero. And that would be nice, wouldn't it? You can put me in a pine box. I'm happy with that. I'm being a little silly here tonight. I'm sorry.
Well, I think we should give the people here, the audience, the people who are here viewing, the opportunity to ask you questions. You have a brother who, sitting out here, who has threatened to ask you a question that he's always been. But is there anyone here who would like to ask some questions? Oh, look at him.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to.
That's all right. I don't really want to answer my brother's questions.
Well, do you have anything else that you would like to share with us?
Oh, not really.
I know we've
Well, I've got
kept
a
you
couple of things.
Okay.
I have little sayings that I like. How many of you know the Home Means Nevada song? Is there any?
Do they teach that anymore in school?
I don't know.
Yeah,
But
we
boy,
all know
that
it.
was part of our education. We had to learn that song. Do you think I'm going to sing it or not? Okay. But I thought real well for you. No. Okay, me and you friends. Me and you as friends. I smile, or you smile, I smile. You hurt, I hurt. You cry, I cry. You jump off a bridge, I'm going to miss you.
Dorothy, who are some of your friends here? I was trying to think who would be about in some of your classes.
You know what? I think friends were older and younger. We just didn't distinguish between Gary and Monta there were our age, and I don't know whether anyone else is here that age or not, but they're just kids now. Anyway.
That's true. Yeah, it didn't matter.
Yeah. We had
was your graduating high school class very big? What size?
we had 15.
15.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was,
I knew every one of them.
and that was that in 55?
It was 55, and you know what? We were so close. And usually at graduation, everybody's throwing up their hats and yay, yay. And we stood in a circle with boys and girls, and we all cried. We cried. It was an era that was over, and it was so tender and precious to us. And as you can tell, I'm a big crybaby.
So you had 15. I was thinking, 10 years later, we had 22, or not. So we must have grown a little bit. So what did some of your classmates go off and do? What were they?
Well, okay. Clark River he was a legislator in Utah, and does a lot of things there. Phyllis Hughes passed away 2 or 3 months after graduation in an accident. Yeah. And Betty and Sheila Levitt and Carol Hardy were from Bunkerville in the class, and Gabby Barnum and Kay Levitt, and who else? Neil Reese. I could remember 15, couldn't I?
Do you still have reunions?
We did. We had Arlene Solomon. Yeah, we had reunion a while back.
Who was your favorite teacher?
You know, we had wonderful teachers. I mean, I don't know that we should even say there's a favorite. Boy, there's some of them that have made a difference in my life. And I guess I have to, you know, I wrote some down here. I don't want to forget any. Let's see. I do have to mention Mabel Mitchell, because Brill reminded me a while back, as a child, I covered my mouth all the time. If I spoke, I'd cover my mouth, and my mom would get so upset at it, and he said this went on for years. I don't know whether it's because I felt like I didn't have anything of value to say, or if I was ashamed to be talking, or what the reason was, but I always covered my mouth. And so as we get into school and high school, and I would watch Mabel Mitchell, and I'd watch her confidence, and she'd tell us things like, spit your words out. And I'd think, okay. And so I'd go home and practice spitting my words out and trying to gain a little confidence. But I think her confidence, whatever she did, she excelled in. If it was making clothes, if it was making a meal, if it was dancing, if whatever, she was really a...
She was a wonderful teacher. I remember one day one of my children came home and said, Mom, we have the most wonderful substitute today. Her name was Mabel Mitchell. I could not believe that she was still as dynamic as she, really having an effect on students' lives.
Right.
Now that was in high school? Was that in high school?
That was in high school, and of course the music programs. The thing about a small school is if you have a play, everyone's in it. If you have a band, everyone's in it. If you have a chorus, everyone's in it. And they did not have foreign languages in those days. But I'll tell you, the experiences that you had in participating in everything, if there was a dance program, you were in it. If there was a speech contest, you were in it.
And didn't it take most of the boys to make up sports teams, too?
Yes, sports, you could spend a whole night on sports. I mean, that was big time.
Well, yeah, you have a really neat section in the book on the
Yeah.
sports and the championships that the kids took and the hard work and how hard it was to travel to those games.
Wasn't it wonderful that they had the competitions, and the first basketball that came in the valley, I think it was in 1911, changed the valley forever.
Yeah, basketball has held.
Yeah. So,
Well,
do you want me to tell you one joke and then
oh,
we'll
go for it.
Okay, let's see, where did I have this? It was so good for all you golfers. I thought I had it here, let's see. Maybe I won't tell it to you. Eat right, exercise, die anyway. That wasn't it. Wouldn't you know it, brain cells come and brain cells go, but fat cells live forever. That's not it. Being over the hill is much better than being under it. That's not it. Okay, don't sell your only mule to buy a plow. That's not it. Here's it. A golfer asked his tardy friend, "Why are you so late?" The friend said, "It's Sunday. I had to toss a coin and choose between going to church or playing golf. And it took 25 tosses to get it right."
Well, Dorothy, I want to thank you for coming tonight.
Thank
It's
you.
been a real pleasure, and it's been
Thank
so
you.
fun having the chance to visit with you and talk with you other times too in preparation for this.
Thank you.
I've come to love you and appreciate your skills and your talents, and I think we all owe you a lot in
Thank you.
your
Bless
research
all
and
of you.
history.
I mean, you could have been home watching that Iowa caucus. Look at you.
Oh, Dorothy,
I'm
you're much better than
impressed.
that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, a great thanks to Dorothy, Frehner, Thurston. Again, let's have a round of applause. As you can well tell, she has rich experience and she's a good storyteller, which makes for a wonderful evening. On behalf of the Birch Valley Historic Committee, Geraldine and Dorothy, would you mind coming down here? We have something for the both of you.
I was going to hide behind the thing there.
Let me go. As a token of our appreciation, we have this plaque as a memento for you that states on this day you contributed greatly to the historical committee and
Thank you.
the information we have.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we also have one for Geraldine Zarate. Thank you for being our moderator this evening.
Thank you, Mark.
It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you. All right. Thank you for coming. Just so you know, we do have future founders forums. The information is available on the city's website. Please check that calendar on that page often. We will have those posted. Also, copies of this and past founders forums are available for viewing at the Virgin Valley Museum. Also, for those in attendance here, please sign in on the sheet at the door if you would like to be notified of future founders forums. Put your name and your email address there. We can send that to you. And also, we have some light refreshments if you'd like to partake in those as well.
Yes, and Dwayne has books for all of you. Take as many as you want until they're gone.
Look, River
If you need them for fire burn.